My name is Grace, and for about 6 months, I drove for a rideshare app on the weekends to supplement my income. I am a kindergarten teacher during the week, and the extra money helped. I drove Friday and Saturday nights mostly, which meant drunk passengers, loud passengers, and the occasional person who fell asleep in the back seat. Nothing that bad. I considered myself a decent judge of character, and I had a good system for staying safe. What happened one Saturday night in October made me question every part of that system. I had just dropped someone off and was a few miles outside the city on a back road, taking a shortcut back to the main highway when my check engine light came on. I pulled over, tried to reset it, and the car died entirely. Full power loss, lights, radio, everything. I sat there in the dark on the side of a road that had no street lights and no other cars. And I tried my phone and had 1 bar of service that was not enough to load anything. I had been sitting there maybe 10 minutes when headlights appeared behind me. A man got out of the truck. Big guy, older, maybe 60. He had on a flannel shirt and work boots. And he walked to my window, and I cracked it 2 inches. And he said, "Looks like you're having some trouble." He said there was no signal out here for another couple miles, and offered to drive me to the gas station up the road where I could use their phone. I said no thank you. He said he had a daughter about my age, and he would not feel right leaving me here alone, and he was just going to sit in his truck until he knew I was okay. I did not know how to feel about that. On one hand, it felt kind. On the other hand, I was alone on a dark road, and a stranger had just told me he was not leaving. About 15 minutes passed, and another car came from the opposite direction and slowed down, and the driver, a woman, rolled her window down and asked if I needed help. The man in the truck got out again and walked over to her car. That is when I locked my doors. He said something to her I could not hear, and then she said something back, and then he turned and started walking toward my car again. Not toward his truck, toward me. I called 911. 1 bar was enough for that. I told them my location. I kept my eyes on him. He reached my window and knocked on the glass and said, "That woman up there says there is a garage about 3 miles east. We can both take you." I said I had already called for help and it was on the way. He looked at me for a long moment and then nodded and said, "All right then," and walked back to his truck. He did not leave. He sat in his truck with the engine running and did not leave. The woman in the other car also did not leave. They were parked, one in front and one behind me, and I sat in the middle with the phone pressed to my ear. The police arrived 11 minutes later. When the officers approached the truck, they ran the plates and the man was arrested on a warrant from another county. The woman in the front car drove away the moment she saw the police lights, and they were unable to stop her in time. But the detective I spoke with afterward told me that the man had 2 prior convictions for assault, and that the stretch of road I had broken down on was remote enough that it would have taken significantly longer for anyone to find me if something had gone wrong. I stopped driving for the rideshare app the following week. I told myself it was because of the car trouble, but that was not why, and I knew it. I still take the long way home from anywhere that puts me on a back road at night. I probably always will. This took place 3 years ago, and I can still walk through every room of that house in my mind like I never left it. Every creak of the floor, every shadow in the hallway. I was 26 years old, and I had just moved into a house with 2 roommates, a guy named Marcus and a woman named Priya. The house was old, but the rent was good, and the 3 of us got along well enough. Marcus worked early morning shifts at a bakery and was usually asleep by 9. Priya traveled for work and was gone sometimes for a week at a time. That meant there were long stretches where I was alone in that house, which never bothered me in the beginning. I had been living there for about 2 months when I noticed the first thing. It was small, my coffee mug. I kept it on the second shelf of the cabinet, handle facing right, because that is the way I always put it. One morning I came down and the handle was facing left. I stood there staring at it for probably 30 seconds, trying to remember if I had done it differently the night before. I told myself I had. I made my coffee and went to work. A week later, I found the back door unlocked. I was almost certain I had locked it. I asked Marcus and Priya, and neither of them had used the back door. Again, I told myself I had simply forgotten. Then one night I was lying in bed, and I heard footsteps on the floor below me, slow, deliberate, crossing from the kitchen to the living room and then stopping. I told myself it was the house settling. Old houses make noise. I had heard that my entire life. What I did not know then, and what I only found out weeks later, was that there was a crawl space accessible from a small panel in the back of my bedroom closet that connected to a second panel in the utility room. I had never opened my closet panel. I did not even know it was there. It looked like part of the wall. I found out because of the smell. It started as something faint, like damp earth mixed with something else I could not name. I thought maybe a pipe had leaked somewhere in the walls. I called the landlord and he sent someone to check, but they did not find anything. The smell faded after a few days and I forgot about it. Then one night, Priya was home and she knocked on my bedroom door and said, "Have you been going into my room when I am away?" She said something was different each time she came back. Not dramatically different, just slightly. A book moved, a drawer not fully closed. The kind of things you notice only because you know your own space. We called the landlord again. He came himself this time. He found the panel in my closet. It had been recently disturbed. There was mud on the floor of the crawl space, and the second panel in the utility room had a simple latch on it that could be opened from either side. Whoever it was had access to the outside utility room, which was never locked. The police came and searched the crawl space with flashlights. They found a thin sleeping bag rolled up at the far end, a water bottle, and a small flashlight with the batteries worn almost completely down. Someone had been living inside the walls of our house. For how long, we never found out. They never found who it was. I stayed in a hotel that night and broke my lease the following morning. Marcus and Priya did the same. None of us ever went back for more than a single trip to collect belongings, always during the day, always with someone else present. I have lived in 4 apartments since then. The first thing I do when I move in before I unpack a single box is check every wall, every closet, every panel. Every single time. I always will. I want to start by saying that I am a very practical person. I do not believe in things I cannot explain, and I have never in my life told a story like this one because I have never in my life experienced anything I could not account for with a reasonable explanation. I am a nurse. I have worked nights in a hospital for 11 years. I have seen things that would make most people fall apart, and I have stayed steady through all of it. I tell you this not to brag, but because I need you to understand that what I am about to describe is not the product of an overactive imagination or a mind that was looking for something to be afraid of. 4 years ago, last week of November. The hospital where I work is old. Parts of it were built in the early 1950s, and the East Wing in particular has a quality to it at night that even the most skeptical staff members will quietly acknowledge if you catch them in the right mood. Long hallways, poor lighting in the older sections, the kind of place that has absorbed too much of everything over too many decades. I was doing my rounds at around 3 in the morning when I noticed a patient in room 114 sitting up in bed. This was unusual because the patient in room 114 was an elderly man named Mr. Holt, who had been largely unresponsive for 3 days. I went in and he was sitting perfectly upright with his eyes open, and he was looking at the corner of the room near the window. I spoke to him. I asked him how he was feeling. He did not respond to me, but his lips were moving very slightly. I checked his vitals. Everything was stable. I dimmed the lights and told him gently that he should try to rest, and I left. When I came back 20 minutes later, he was lying down and his eyes were closed. He passed away at 4:17 that morning. It was not until the following week that a junior nurse named Theo mentioned in passing that he had noticed something odd on room 114's call monitor the night Mr. Holt died. The call button had been pressed at 3:08 in the morning. Mr. Holt had been unresponsive for 3 days. His hands had shown no purposeful movement in any of our documentation. Theo said, probably just the equipment. Old wiring in that wing does strange things. I agreed with him out loud. But I have been a nurse for 11 years, and I know the difference between an equipment glitch and a call button that someone pressed. And I have thought about the way he was looking at that corner of the room, at something I could not see, with an expression on his face that I can only describe as recognition, like he was seeing someone he knew. I have never told anyone the part that I am about to tell you now, not even Theo, when I walked back into room 114 the second time and found Mr. Holt lying down with his eyes closed. The chair in the corner of the room, the one near the window where he had been looking, was pulled slightly away from the wall. It had not been that way when I walked in the first time. I have a reasonable explanation for that too. I just have not been able to make myself believe it. My name is Kevin Park, and I used to think that nothing interesting ever happened in my neighborhood. It was one of those quiet suburban streets where every house looks more or less like the one next to it, and the most excitement you could expect on any given week was somebody's sprinkler running into the sidewalk. I was 15 years old, and the summer had been long and boring in the best possible way. My parents both worked days, and I spent most of my time between our house and the house of my best friend, a kid named Dom, who lived 4 doors down. This was toward the end of August. Dom and I had been playing video games at his place most of the afternoon, and around 7, his mom called us down for dinner. I stayed for about an hour and then walked home. Our street was one of those where the houses face each other across a narrow road, and you can see pretty clearly into the front rooms of the houses opposite if the lights are on and the curtains are open. I was almost home when I noticed the house directly across from ours had a light on that I had never seen before. Not the living room, not the porch. A small window near the back corner on the second floor that I could not remember ever seeing lit up before. I did not think much of it. The house had been rented out a few weeks earlier to a single man named Mr. Callow, quiet, nodded. Hello if you passed him, never said much. My mom had tried to bring him a welcome casserole, and he had opened the door about 8 inches, thanked her, and taken it without inviting her in. 3 nights later, I was lying awake late, and the house across the street had that same light on again in that same back window. It was maybe 11 at night. I watched it for a while without really meaning to, and that is when I realized there was a shape behind the glass, a person, standing still, facing our house. I told myself it was just Mr. Callow in his own home, doing whatever people do in their own homes at 11 at night. But then Dom told me something. He said that 2 nights before, coming back from the corner store after dark, he had seen Mr. Callow standing at the end of our street, just watching the houses. Not walking, not doing anything, just standing with his hands at his sides, staring down the block. Dom had walked past him and said, "Hey," and the man had not responded at all, just turned slowly and walked back toward his house. I told my dad. My dad was the kind of man who did not want to cause trouble or embarrass himself by being wrong about something. So he did not go confront the neighbor or call anyone. But that night, I noticed he left the outside lights on, and I heard him check the locks twice before bed. 2 days later, a police car came to Mr. Callow's house. Then another one. I watched from the upstairs window as 2 officers went inside and came back out with Mr. Callow in handcuffs. It turned out he was not Mr. Callow at all. The man who had been living there was wanted in connection with a harassment and stalking case involving a family in another city. They found a camera inside that small back window. It had been positioned facing the street and had been recording for at least 2 weeks. Our house was directly in frame. My parents never told me exactly what the police found on those recordings. I was 15 and I think they were trying to protect me. I heard pieces of it over the next few days. Enough to understand that what had felt like a vague, uncomfortable summer unease had been something much more deliberate than that. We moved the following spring.
We moved the following spring. My parents said it was for a bigger yard.
It was for a bigger
We're
yard.
almost done, Kevin.
I never believed that.
I never believed.
But I also never pushed them on it. Some things you understand better by leaving them alone. My name is Daniel Reeves, and I work the overnight shift at a 24-hour laundromat on the edge of town. It is not a glamorous job by any stretch of the imagination. You sit behind a counter, you make sure no one breaks the machines, and every now and then you hand someone a roll of quarters. Most nights, nothing happens at all. The place smells like detergent and old fabric, and the fluorescent lights buzz just enough to keep you company. I had been doing it for about 8 months when the night I am about to describe happened. And I want you to know that I am not someone who scares easily. I grew up in a rough neighborhood. I have seen things, but nothing in my life prepared me for her. It was the middle of February, and the night was brutally cold. We are talking single digits, wind chill, making it feel like the temperature had no bottom. On nights like that, the laundromat got a few extra people because it was warm inside and nobody was going to kick you out for sitting with your laundry for 3 hours. I did not mind. More people meant the shift went faster. She came in around 2 in the morning. She was a woman, maybe mid-40s, with long dark hair that was wet even though it had not been raining. She wore a beige coat that was a size too big for her, and she carried no laundry bag, no basket, nothing. She just walked to the row of plastic chairs along the far wall, sat down and stared straight ahead. I figured she was cold. People came in just to warm up sometimes. I went back to my phone. For about an hour, nothing happened. She just sat there, not on her phone, not reading anything, not even really moving. I glanced at her a few times, and each time she was in the exact same position. Hands folded in her lap, eyes forward. I told myself she was just tired. A lot of people who come in at 2 in the morning are tired. Then around 3, she walked up to my counter. She put both hands flat on the glass and leaned forward and looked at me and said, very quietly, "He is going to come in here tonight. I need you to call the police when he does. Do not let him know you are calling. Do not react. Just call. She described a man, tall, dark jacket, scar above his left eyebrow. She said his name was Paul, and that he had been following her for 11 days, and that tonight was the first night she had felt like she was actually going to die. I believed her. I do not know why exactly, but I did. Something in the way she said it. No hysteria, no tears. Just this flat calm that was somehow more frightening than screaming would have been. I told her I would call. She went back to her chair. 20 minutes later, the door opened. He was exactly as she described. Tall, dark jacket. And the moment he walked in, his eyes went straight to her like he already knew where she was. He did not look at the machines. He did not look at me. He walked directly toward her, and I picked up the phone and dialed 911, and I told the dispatcher in the quietest voice I could manage that I needed police at my address immediately. She had stood up by then. They were talking. I could not hear what they were saying, but I could see his body language, and it made my stomach turn. He had positioned himself between her and the door, not touching her, not doing anything you could technically call a crime from across the room, but making it very clear she was not leaving. The police arrived in 4 minutes. It felt like 40. When they walked through the door, the man turned and tried to walk out like nothing had happened, and they stopped him right there. It came out later that he had a restraining order against him from 2 other women in different counties. They found her address written on a piece of paper in his pocket. He had been parked outside her apartment building 4 of the last 11 nights. She came back the next evening during my shift. She brought me a coffee and a slice of banana bread wrapped in foil. She said, "Thank you," and I said it was nothing, and she said, "No, it really was not nothing," and then she left. I think about that a lot. How close it came to going a completely different way, and how she walked into a laundromat at 2 in the morning in the freezing cold because she trusted a stranger behind a counter to do the right thing. I am glad I did not let her down.